And he said, you ought to apply for the Air Force Academy. I applied. Lo and behold, I got selected. Then I go, oh my goodness, what have I done?
And they said, oh, there's this really great non-denominational church. So I hear non-denominational, and I'm thinking snakes and chickens in the church.
We went to a church that was a big Baptist church, and everybody wore suits. And if you walked down like you're dressed today, if the stairs could kill, they would have you dead halfway down the aisle.
I said, God, why are you doing this to me? Why is this happening? That night, I had a dream.
And they said, okay, to be a church member of our new church that we're thinking, you have to be baptized. It was it was December. Old church, the water must have been 33 degrees. And I said, oh, Lord.
Would you recommend new believers to join a small group and people who might not be believers yet?
Yeah, I think small groups are important for new believers, middle-of-the-road believers, old believers. How long does your dad get to talk? 30 minutes? It's not enough. People are going to hate me for this, but we just like nice, gentle, some inclines and everything like that, and just to go and enjoy. We always want a good view. We hate it if we hike and there's no
Yeah.
view. You get to the top after you killed yourself and you go, why do we do this?
Yeah,
This is
that's true.
it's no fun.
Mm.
But anyway,
Yeah.
we're just, old and retired.
What are some of your favorite hikes around the area?
Well, always wherever we go out camping, because we have an RV, we hike.
Okay.
We just find hikes, but we like
There's a hike over by Greenwood. It's called Sanborn River, or something like that.
Okay.
It's over in Greenwood, and that's probably one of our favorite hikes. Just go up there. It's close by to us, and it's really pretty gentle. Just an easy hike
Sure.
in 3 miles, 3 to 4 miles. So that's one of our favorite. And we like Wits End over in Norway.
Wits End. I'm not
Yeah.
familiar with that.
It's
I don't
off
know why I
of.
know that.
it could be buggy.
Oh, okay.
It could be
But
it could be
but it's
swampy.
it's a really nice.
But we like to camp over at the national park in Gorham,
Dolly Cop.
Dolly Cop.
Dolly
We
Cop.
go there and camp because it's so it's like an hour drive over there, so it's a great place. We just go, okay, let's go,
Yeah.
and then of course they have all kind of trails up there because you can get on the AT or just there's a lot of just out of the campground, and some of it could be strenuous because you're in the whites, you're sorry I hit the thing.
You're good. You're good.
I use my hands a lot.
Craig, Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on. Oh, see, I just did it. There you go. Thank you so much for coming on the So What's the Point podcast. Super glad that you could sit down, just have a conversation with us today. Just want to get started by understanding a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, where you grew up. Walk through maybe a few major events that happened throughout your childhood.
I was born and raised in Georgia.
Okay.
Can you tell by my accent? And so I grew up in your typical middle class family. I was the youngest of three, and my older siblings are a lot older than I am. My sister's 12 years older than I am. My brother's 10 years older.
Mm.
I grew up in just a normal household in
Mm.
Georgia. Both my parents worked and, went to school, did all the things you're supposed to do. And, I grew up in the church. I
Mm.
mean, going to church and everything. And I can't think of anything extraordinary that I did. It was just, it was back in the days when we didn't lock our doors and you never knew where your kids were because we were always outside playing all the time.
Mm.
And, summer came and we didn't wear shoes. Honestly, we we were
There you go.
barefooted all the time, and but just outdoors all the
Mm.
time. Graduated from high school in 1974 and went off to
Okay.
college, and at the University of South Alabama, which at the time was a small school and now it's very big in
Hmm.
Mobile, and came back and met my husband. My
Mm.
degree was in therapeutic recreation.
Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah.
What does that entail?
Well, it's actually providing recreation type therapy
Okay.
for, say, special populations, and it could be maybe with geriatrics, working in
Okay.
a senior center or something like that,
Sure.
working with handicapped people, people with like I want to say mentally disabled.
Hmm.
They were born with special. So providing, working with the doctor, the physical therapist, all the different therapists working together for goals to help with, say, motor skills, doing just different things
Mm.
like that. So
What sparked that interest in the beginning?
it was interesting because when I was in high school and church, we formed we had a Sunday school class. I grew up in a Baptist church for special needs children,
Okay.
and I started volunteering in there, and I just sort of I enjoyed doing it,
Mm,
working with that population and helping them, and just doing that. And to tell you the truth, when I went to college, I really didn't know what I was going to do. It was like,
hmm.
you go to college because you're expected to go. What are you going to do?
Sure.
And I thought I wanted to teach, and then after my first year, I was like, no, I don't think I really want to be in a classroom all day long. And I found out about this was a new field,
Mm,
and to be able to do that.
mm,
So I don't know. I've always been able to had a heart to help with special populations, and
mm.
it's it just came natural to me.
I definitely want to touch more on this, but I do want to hear a little bit of your story as well.
Well, I grew up in a little small town, 5,000 people, northern Indiana. So we
Okay.
were used to all the lake effect snow and cold winters. And
Mm,
I have a brother that's 5 years older and a sister that's 2 years older. And my brother was a very good athlete and head of his class, and I kind of chased after him a little bit. But I love sports. I was in all four sports, and I was good in school, and so
yep.
I excelled in high school. When it came time for college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. My goal originally was to um, go play basketball somewhere. That was my favorite sport, and teach and coach.
Mm,
I kind of think, well, that's really what I want to do. I want to be a coach. I want to teach, and so that was in the back of my mind. And when I got ready for the time, kind of getting my senior year, my parents didn't have a lot of money. We just, pretty lower middle income, and
sure.
I was worried about, well, where am I going to be able to go to school? Because I knew it was going to be a strain on my parents. And
Mm,
my high school basketball coach knew the coach out at the Air Force Academy, and he said, you ought to apply for the Air Force Academy. And I had never really had thought about the military. It just wasn't even
sure.
nobody in my family is military, whatever. And I said, well, it's a scholarship, like I should apply. And so
Yep.
I applied, and then lo and behold, I got selected. And so then I got, oh my goodness, what have I done? But that's really where I made a drastic turn in my life. I went off to Colorado Springs to
Mm,
the Air Force Academy, and then went into the Air Force. So that was, the major turning point in my life. We Jennifer and I actually met on one of my earlier assignments at
mm,
Robbins Air Force Base, Georgia, and she's from that. Her hometown was there, so that's where we got together. So, growing up, my family was Catholic, and we were kind of like where I grew up. Catholics were there were very few Catholics in the town. It was
okay.
like being the one and the only one in my class. But later on, when Jennifer and I met, and after we had kids, we made the decision to go more towards a non-denominational church, and
Sure.
and that's been kind of our most of our history since that time. So we blended. She was Southern Baptist, I was Catholic. Somewhere in between is non-denominational, I guess. But
Mm,
yeah, just pretty. Like I said, grew up in small town America. Northern Indiana was very good. Family values,
mm,
schools were good, and so I felt like I had. Matter of fact, when I was at the Air Force Academy, well, I thought, oh man, am I going to be able to do well? But actually, my education in Indiana was, I think, better than I
mm.
than a lot of places I do. So I didn't struggle at all my freshman year, whereas some of my classmates were, struggling to do that. So I was grateful for really good teachers and
Mm,
coaches and mentors growing up, and it was a
yeah.
good place to grow up. I would not want to live there now. So they
Okay.
never see the sun in the winter.
Speaking of that, is there any specific teachers or coaches you had growing up that still stick in your mind today, and and you've taken some of the lessons that they've taught you, and you're still using those today?
He was my baseball coach and basketball coach for a while. His name was Bob Riley.
Okay.
I always thought he was like really old, but then when I look back, he just passed away just recently. He's in his 80s, but he was just a good coach and mentor.
Yep.
He was always calm. He was a good he taught history. I loved, he was what I modeled kind of like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to coach and teach
Mm.
because he was a great example of that. And there were some other ones too, but he stands out. He just was just a perfect example and mentor of
Mm.
what somebody should be, in my opinion, to coach and teach and mentor young men. And he coached baseball for, I don't know, 40 some years and had a lot of success for a small town area. It was a lot of success.
You just mentioned Southern Baptist and Catholic. What were some problems?
We're a
Because
mixed marriage.
yeah, they're completely different from my understanding. Actually, I want to get a little bit of like what your Southern Baptist was like and a little bit what of your Catholic was like, so I just understand the context of this.
A lot of people, when they think Southern Baptist, they think hellfire and brimstone and, all these rules and regulations. And my church wasn't like that.
Okay,
Now, the pastor that I grew up with,
sure.
that knew me from the time I was 2 years old, baptized me, married me, buried both my parents, um, was he was just a very good, strong Christian, and he
Mm,
taught the Bible. It wasn't opinions and things like that. And
sure.
he talked about hell and sin
Mm,
and, the forgiveness and things like that. So, but it wasn't all this like some people think. And when we started dating, both of us, church was important.
mhm,
And when I was in college, I strayed away, from it and everything. And then what we did is that we would go to my church one Sunday and he would go to mass the next Sunday with him.
mhm,
And that was an eye-opening experience to go to mass. I'd never been to anything like that.
mm,
And it was very interesting. So yeah, we were totally, I grew up in the church that, as I say, the cradle roll, Sunday school, Wednesday night, church, youth. I sang in the choir, the children's choir, the youth choir. Sunday nights we were at church. There was, Sunday night services.
mm,
And it just if the doors were open, we were there.
hmm,
And it was a totally different experience. So when I
mm,
went to church with him, it was interesting.
mm. What was the
Kind of like
Catholic? Yeah.
mixing oil and water. No. Um, the Catholic Church. I mean, I was brought up in it. We were small, so we had a couple local priests that kind of traveled and came. We didn't
Oh, okay.
and did our church in the town I grew up, and they were great examples of Christian men. I think it's sad that so many priests have gotten knocks for going astray and some of the things that happened in the Catholic Church. And
Yeah.
I always felt bad because that was never I was an altar boy and had a real close relationship with the priests, and they were nothing but great mentors
Hmm.
and great teachers. And so I've always had that. So grew up in that. But when we got married, and I was brought up like, oh my goodness, if you leave the Catholic Church, that's it.
Right.
God's gonna strike you dead. Kind of that's a little bit about a little strict interpretation. And so Jennifer actually, we tried to go to that, and it just wasn't working because I think she was brought up in a background where, first of all, you didn't have to go to priest to confess your sins, and that was a big stumbling
Mm,
block. And when I started then as an adult, kind of looking at some of the things that versus normal churches, I started to question it myself, and I said there were too many people that I felt like were just going through the motions.
mhm.
And it's not only true of the Catholic Church, but
Right.
it seemed like go to mass, very scripted, responsorial type things, to where you went in and sometimes you go, gee, what happened there? We just went through, we got up and down and kneeled and prayed and responded, and it was almost just scripted
Hmm.
in far as that went. So, when we went to then, we said, this is just not going to work long term. Our first, I think we were in Mississippi at the time. We went to a Methodist church for a little bit, but then we moved out to Colorado for an assignment.
Okay.
And there was a non-denominational church, very much similar to this church here, and they were meeting in in an area below a strip mall that had a bar above it, but that's where they met on Sundays. But it was thriving because there was a young pastors there that were interested in just teaching the word, and we're very excited, and people were searching for that, and it worked out really well. So then after that, it wasn't so much, because when you're in the military and you move into all these different places, you don't always have a great choice of which church, and you try to get established. When you're overseas, it may be a church that's associated with the base or post that you're at. So, but in general speaking, non-denominational, I think we've probably been at more. When we moved to Florida, we ended up in a Baptist church again, and it was great. I learned a lot from the pastor and young people in Bible studies. So, it again, there were some people I'm kind of anti-denominational, because I think the denominations sometimes in a local area, I never noticed it before, but they're so competitive to the point where I think they're hurting Christianity, because, oh, I'm Presbyterian, oh, I'm Methodist, oh, I'm Baptist, oh, you're Baptist. So, it's almost like, what does that mean? That
Right.
I've never liked a title. I'm a believer. I'm not a Catholic, or I'm not a Baptist. I'm not a Presbyterian. I'm just a believer, and that's what I like about the fact that you don't put a label, because I think labels hurt. People have perceptions immediately. Or in some cases, I think there's some denominations that have gone astray, and from a hierarchical standpoint, and it's hurt the churches below them. So I think our having being in the Air Force, moving all the time, but we tended to find just Bible teaching churches, whatever it was. If it had a denomination and it still had biblical principles, that was okay. And so we've been in different churches, been in Methodist church, but mostly just Methodist or non-denominational or Baptist, probably would be the best way to describe it.
And my pastor said when he talked to us before we got married, he said, "You're going to have to make a decision." He said, "You can't keep doing this because of it." So he said, "Eventually you'll have children. You got to make a decision." And he said, "Greg, I'm not telling you got to become Baptist, and Jennifer, I'm not saying you got to become Catholic." He said, "Maybe you can find something in between," which I thought was really good advice for us. And Greg had said to me, he said, "I don't think I can leave the Catholic Church right now." He said, "It just," and I said, "Okay." So I followed him, and I went through the conversion classes, and I was pregnant with our son. And I I didn't, he laughed. He said, "I never really converted, and I probably never did. I went through the motions."
Sure.
And one of the things was confession. I am not going to a man to confess my sins when I knew I could go, directly to God.
Mm-hmm.
I stood by my husband. I did followed him. He was the spiritual leader of the house. But when we left the church, it was interesting. Left the Catholic Church, and when we met a couple where we were at in Mississippi, in Biloxi, Mississippi. We lived in base housing, so they had just come from Colorado, from Denver, where we were going to, and we were talking to them and everything, and they said, "Oh, there's this really great non-denominational church." Well, me growing up Southern Baptist, I hear non-denominational, and everybody laughs about it. I'm thinking snakes and chickens in the church. I'm sorry. It's like, I said, "Is my husband ready for this?" And but we got there, and it was just a great church, with great worship, young people, a very young church, a lot of, small children. They were teaching the word, and we both grew, and I saw him really grow. Someone who grew up not really reading the Bible and doing things, and hearing that growing spiritually. God led us there. I think, it was definitely a God thing.
You've been to a lot of different churches across the United States, everywhere. For a newer believer who's going to a church, what are a few things you could tell them that they would be able to distinguish the church they're going to from being a Bible preaching church that actually is following God and not just trying to follow that title you were talking about, just trying to fit under a title?
You've got to read the Bible.
Mm.
And I think if they're putting parameters on what you have to be when you come into worship, then you need to step back and go, wait a minute, does it matter how I look, how I dress, you know, whatever? But I think this, and I imagine as a new believer, it's hard because you don't know
Mm,
the Bible, you don't understand it, but um, it's I I don't know, it's hard to say. I would just say, go with your gut feeling. Do you feel comfortable there, or do you feel, but then you can't say feel comfortable, because if you're sinning and you want someone to say, "Okay, it's okay if you do this, come." And there are a
mm,
lot of churches that say, "Oh, God gives us grace.
mhm,
If you sin, he'll forgive you. He gives you grace, but you've got to stop that sin."
mm,
I mean, we all sin. I mean, we sin every day,
mhm,
but you've got to not say, "Oh, forgive me for this sin," but then you keep living that lifestyle,
mm.
no matter what it is. Like I said, it's hard to say because
Yeah.
you've got to read the Bible. I mean, you've got to understand, but it's hard if you're a new believer to
Mm,
understand that. But I think the best thing to do is try to find someone you think is that you can relate to, and talk to them about what your questions are, and things like that.
mm,
I would just say too, if I went to a church today and if I didn't see either on the screen or part of the message or something, scripture,
mm,
that the message wasn't scripture based, I would be cautioned, because
mm.
I've been places where you go in and maybe the preacher or pastor talks about love, and talks for 30 minutes about love, and never once is their Bible
Yeah.
passage mentioned. So I
Mm,
I would say one of the key things is that feeling that they are teaching from the Word, and not a lot of just you know quoting somebody else, or quoting
yeah.
Sturgeon, or quoting whatever, but they actually are teaching the Bible. And I think too, it's just if I was a new believer, I would just look at the people, and is there joy? If
Mm,
nobody's happy, you go, wait a minute, what's this all about? I thought it was supposed to be uplifting, and
mm,
and that. So I think you just a little bit too, and I think Jennifer hit on it too. Is that the we went to a church in Fernandina Beach that was a big Baptist church, and kind of old guard. Everybody wore suits and
okay.
things, and if you walk down like you're dressed today,
Yep.
if looks could stairs could kill, they would have you dead halfway down the aisle. It was, there were people that said, "Oh no, 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 you can't. If you don't come all dressed for church." I think the comfort level of the people, are they kind of, like
Mm,
you, and do they make an effort to engage in the service, and not just not be. Like I said, I am very much not a fan, having grown up in the Catholic Church, of
yeah.
responsorial um, way of worship, where they say something and you say something back, because I feel like it just becomes rote, and there's no feeling in it, and you're not even realizing what you're saying. So
Mm,
I'm very much against that kind of, and it's not, I mean, not, there are churches that do that, but I feel like
yeah.
that's just not I think it's just, are they spending time in the
Right.
Word?
You mentioned very briefly you had a slight falling away from God and then came back. What was that story? What was happening in that time of your life?
I went off to college,
Mm,
and I was away from home, and I wasn't in the normal routine. And back when I was in school in college, I mean, think about it, I graduated from high school in 74, so
mhm,
74 to 78.
mhm,
We had a youth group in church, but it wasn't, say, as vibrant as what we've got here or what
mm,
you find nowadays. And when we went to college, didn't find Christian groups to go to.
mm,
Now I think it's more on campuses. So I just I fell into the ways of the world.
sure.
And not that I was a bad person, but I was not walking. I'd come home and I didn't come home that often because I was 7 hours away.
Mm,
But when I did come home and holidays, I went to church. I mean, I did that and everything like that. But I wasn't at college. I wasn't going. I wasn't involved. There wasn't the opportunities, and so I just drifted away. But then after I graduated, and like I said, we met. We both felt drawn that we needed to be in church. That
Mm.
I needed that. Was it rebellion? I don't know. Was it just, I was not under mom and dad's roof anymore, and it wasn't like my parents were these really strict people
Mm.
that. But I just got lazy and fell away. I
Mm.
wasn't out doing drugs and drinking and stuff like that. So never
Mm.
smoked.
Part of it, right, is the environment you're in, putting yourself in the correct environment with the correct people to be able to grow a relationship, but also actually believing that Christ is real and that he did die for your sins. Was there a specific moment in where you realized that that was ultimately true, like without a doubt?
That's hard to say because I've thought about that because I
Mm.
never had. I know there's some people, especially when you're older, that become believers. They had this, they just aha moment, I
Right.
want to say.
Yeah.
And growing up in the church, I mean, I remember at age 6, I accepted Christ, and I went and talked to my pastor, and he talked about asking questions, and then I was immersed, I was baptized. It's not like I had this aha moment. There was times, we'd go away to, a youth weekend or something like that, and you have the uplifting experience, and it's times like that. But I think it's honestly, and I can't say I still had like this, you know, moment.
Yeah.
It was,
Yeah.
as we got married and we were going along and having children, then I said it's important that my kids grow up in the church, that they see that the example. And there's been times that I things were happening. One time I think about it is when my father was dying. I had gone back to Georgia from Colorado with the kids, moved back because we knew the Air Force was sending Greg to Belgium for a year without me.
Mm.
And it was a big, long, convoluted story. But my dad was dying. I
Mm.
came home early, had to find a place to live, do everything with a 3 and a 4-year old.
Mm.
Luckily, I had my family there. I didn't even have a car, and I was borrowing cars from the family. But
Mm.
through this whole thing, everything going on, I was like going, why is God letting this happen? Why is he separating us? Why is he sending, Greg going away? I'm here with these 2 kids.
Mm.
And my father passed away right after the first of the year. And, the same thing, Greg, he came from Colorado and he was home for a month, and then I put him on an airplane and he left. And I thought he was going to be gone for a year. And I'm there. I'm grieving my father. I've got a 3 and a 4-year old.
Mm.
My mother's grieving and everything. And I said, God, why are you doing this to me? And I was back in my old church that I grew up in.
Yeah.
And it's not like I didn't have support, but I'm going, God, why is this happening? And then after Greg got over to Belgium, found out they'd made a mistake on his orders,
Mm.
the children and I were supposed to come. And so then we had to go through all that to get permission for me to be able to go over and different
Mm.
things. But I realized afterwards when he called me and said, everything's approved, you're coming over. That night, I had a dream and I felt like I was awake, and my father was standing at the foot of my bed,
Mm.
never said a word to me, didn't, nothing. And he just looked at me and he had this look of peace on him. And he's like, I'm okay.
Mm.
Get on with your life.
Mm.
And the next morning, Greg called and said that we were approved. We had orders. The kids and I were coming.
Mm.
And then I realized that I got to spend those last couple of months with my father.
Mm.
I got to be there with my mother those couple of months afterwards to spend time with her. My kids got to spend time with their grandmother, to see my sister lived in town, things that they normally didn't do. So
Mm.
those 4 months of the separation and the craziness, there was a reason. God had a reason, and it was for me to be there with my parents, to be with my father, to say goodbye, and to be with my mother afterwards.
Mm.
And I sort of understood, okay, yeah, it was hard, but I knew God was there with me, and I couldn't have gotten through it without him.
Mm.
And my mom was a wonderful Christian woman and was very strong in her faith and all, but just being able to be there with family, I think that's why it happened.
Mm. Did you have a moment, Greg? And
Well, it's very much what similar to what Jennifer said. One thing was I believe that around age 10 or 11 or something in that, where I was kneeling at the altar and I was looking up, in the Catholic Church they have crucifix, and it really hit me that Jesus really suffered and died, um, for us. And from that moment, I think I always believed. I did
Mm,
not always believe in everything about the Catholic Church, and because sometimes the Catholic Church sometimes I think preaches if you just go through all the steps, then you're saved. And it's not that personal relationship. And there's some other religions that are similar. But so later on, when that whole thing that we went through, there was some moments when I was over by myself in Belgium, and I was just praying, God, I said, please just let this get back together. And it happened. And I remember going out on the deck and just sort of just looking to the heavens and saying, thank you, God.
mm,
And it was during that assignment, we were over in Belgium. It was a remote base, so there were very few facilities. And so um, we developed among the people that were stationed there. Somebody said, "Well, let's start a Bible study."
mm,
So we did, and it was based at actually the one of the he was an Air Force major. He was in missiles, but
mm,
he was an ordained Baptist minister,
mm,
and so we actually started a small
Hmm.
church, a Cornerstone Baptist Church over there.
mm,
We rented out a not used old church building. And one of the things that happened during that was that, the Baptists believe in baptism and that you need to be baptized, not infant baptism. And I remember it was a good teaching moment for me, especially because I said, I was very much, I said, I've been baptized. I don't need to be baptized again,
mm,
and was very much against it. And finally, and they said, okay, to be a church member of our new church that we're thinking, you have to be baptized. And I went, oh, I just kind of begrudgingly said, okay, let's do it.
sure.
Get baptized. Just do it so I can get over this. And so we didn't have any facilities, so we went up to it was actually a NATO base that had a bigger church there. It was it was December. They had the church wasn't open, but they allowed us to go in.
It was an
Old
old
church.
building.
The water must have been 33 degrees. Um, and I said, "Oh Lord," and so worse than the pool at down the road. But anyhow, a really really neat thing happened, and totally unexpected because I went in there just thinking, okay, just do it, whatever. But that experience when I came out of the water, it was just a huge Holy Spirit moment.
Mm,
Um, it just dawned on me that what I had just done, and there's maybe a half dozen people went up with us, but I basically made a public profession of my faith,
mm,
and it was just such a freeing moment. It was just
mhm,
at first it was just there were two feelings. One was a Holy Spirit just sending chills down me. Second, it was my body telling me I'd just been dunked in 30-degree water. But the feeling afterwards was just incredible. It was nothing I expected. I just expected, get
yeah.
wet, change clothes, go home, checked it off, baptism again. I was already baptized. But it really made me realize too that as that it's important to make that public profession. So both of those happened within a couple years time. So I would say that events there of her father dying, us going remote, myself making a public profession,
Mhm,
really changed our I guess it reset. We were both firmly convinced, I think, that we need to really follow Christ and be,
mm,
so it was a learning lesson, big learning lesson.
mm. So, how did the two of you meet? What was that like?
He had a date with my roommate. Seriously.
Yep.
Okay, so
And
this
I
is
thought she talked too
interesting.
much. So yeah, a friend of mine that I was stationed with at Robbins Air Force Base,
Okay,
um, he was engaged to be married, and
yeah.
I
um,
was coming home.
she was really good friends with his
Yeah, it was
fiance.
my senior year in college, and I had come back to Georgia to interview for an internship,
Mhm,
and my roommate came with me,
mhm,
and
and
Two, yeah,
another
two,
two
yeah,
roommates. So
two of my roommates that came with me, and so originally Mike, because whenever I'd come home on a hot vacation or whatever, Mike and Becky would introduce me to an officer to go out with to go do something and do stuff like that.
Sure.
And I have to qualify this. My intent growing up at a military base in a military town, that I never intended to marry anybody in the Air Force, much less an officer, and I did. But anyway, they we so when they found out I was bringing my roommates, and Terry was very tall, my one roommate, and Greg was the tallest guy that he knew there, and so I was originally supposed to go out with Greg, but Greg then went out with Terry, and I went out with somebody else.
Hmm.
But we laughed. That's how we met. And then they were getting married in July. Our friends were, and so I was going to be in the wedding.
Hmm.
And when I came home, I remember it was the rehearsal dinner, and after they'd had the dinner, we went over to the officers club, and Greg was there, and he asked me to dance. And so from then on, then after that, he asked me if I'd come back the next week, because I was living a couple hours away. I was in Augusta then. I was living about 3 hours away, and he said, "Would I like to come back, next weekend for a party?" And so I did, and that's how it started.
Hmm.
I lived 3 hours away, and then when I finished my internship, I got a job, but just an hour away, so I was able to
Okay.
come home every weekend. So we had a long distance relationship
Hmm.
through the whole time
yeah.
we dated.
Hmm. So through your professional life, Greg, um, can you take me a little bit through what you did, a few places you're stationed, because it seems like you guys are stationed all over, and just have some sort of understanding of exactly what you were doing.
When I graduated from the academy, a majority of people went on to fly. I was not pilot rated, so I went to school to learn communications electronics.
Hmm.
So in the Air Force, they have bases. Almost always will have communications at that base for back in the days to send messages, the telephone system, air traffic control systems.
Right.
So at every Air Force base, there was always a job for a communications officer.
Hmm.
So in that, then I just went it was always communications
Hmm.
related. So, for example, when we went to the base in Belgium, it was a brand new base being built. So they had contractors, but we had to manage all the installation of all the cables, all the
Hmm.
television, not television, but just communications, telephone systems, and all that thing. So it's always been related to communications. When I was stationed in Washington D.C. area, I was with a group that did planning for satellite
Hmm.
communication satellites. So all the type of things all those things circling around the air. Then I did that, and then in the senior levels, it was mostly just policy, but again, always related to communications and intelligence and those type of systems that support
Hmm.
that. So, I did that for 26 years. So,
Wow.
I learned early on in our marriage that I didn't ask him what he did, because he said he couldn't tell me. So I knew. Basically, we laugh about that he said, "Well, yeah, I can't tell you, or I'd have to kill you." So that was a joke between us. I didn't ask.
Through being in the military, moving around a lot, how was having something much greater than you to believe in a priority, and also something that helps you through those times?
Well, that's hard to say, because I think, like I said, no matter what we were going through, we knew that we weren't alone.
Mm.
That God was always going to be there with us. We might not understand at the time what was going on. And I think the longer we were married, when we first got married, we were moving every 12 to 18 months.
Wow.
We were moving. And I remember the one time we were at a function, and the four-star general was talking to Greg. His wife we were there, and Greg was telling him, he said, "Where have you been? What you been doing?" And Greg was telling him the progression. And he was actually in his first command then, is when we were in Belgium, and we were laughing. And the donor goes, "Yeah, you're right on schedule." And the wife looked at me, and I went, because we'd moved like 3 times, and that or more,
Mhm.
and I was going, I can't do this. But I think just every time we knew it was, I don't know. It's just we knew it was our life, and and I always just had a sense of peace. I knew that God was
Mm.
going to be there. It was always important for us to try to find a church, because that's when you're going to make your friendships. And the one thing I say about the military is that you're a tight knit community when you're stationed on bases. When you get someplace, someone is your sponsor is going to greet you and help you and get around. So you meet people that way, but
Mm.
then you branch out and start meeting more people. And the church was an important way to do that, to find your community. And I don't know, I can't say that. I think because God's always been there with me. I've never. It's even in the hard times, I've always known He's there. Haven't understood it all the time, but it's hard to explain.
Mm.
Part of it's too just having like the 2 times that we were overseas, we probably wouldn't have had a church if we hadn't had a body of believers to
Mm.
gather with. There may not have been a lot of them, and in
Mm.
both cases, one we started a church. Another case when we were over in the Netherlands, there was a chapel there, base chapel that had Army, Navy, Air Force, and whatever. But we, it's a not kind of mostly non-denominational, but we started small group out of that, and we
Mm.
have friends from that small group that we've stayed in touch with for the last 30 years. So it's good, just having knowing, a body of believers that kind of lift each other up, and it's why it's so important, I think. To come to church, to come be part of the church services, being with somebody that if they believe the same things you do and believe that God's blessing us, we lift each other up. And I think in many cases when you move a lot,
Mm.
for example, when we decided to move up here to Maine to be closer to our children, she expressed some concern, where we need to where are we going to find a church? If you
Mm.
Google it, there's not a lot of a lot of churches.
Yeah.
And we found Moss Brook that way, just by
Mm.
and watching the service, and knew right away. You asked that earlier question. We just knew right away that was going to be our church, because we
Mm.
could tell what was being taught. We could
Mm.
tell the sincerity of the worship team up here on the stage, and we didn't go anywhere else. We came here, and we knew right away. So that knowing that you probably is always going to be a place for you when you move, you just have to find it, because it's there. It may be harder to find in some cases, but
Mm.
knowing that there's a body of believers that want to join you and lift you up, I think is what helped move. I think I counted up, we've moved 17 times in our
Wow.
marriage. So it's been a factor,
Mm.
being able to get through some tough times.
Mm.
Um, having a good body of believers there for that short period of time, sometimes just a couple of years. So
But
Mm.
sometimes it's been 6 months. We've been someplace. So
Mm. I'm going to challenge you guys right now. What was the most difficult part of your marriage, and how did you work through it?
well, the difficult to handle. I don't think I've ever felt more low in my life. Back to the example I said, when I had to say goodbye to Jennifer and the kids,
Mm.
knowing that I was going to be gone for a year. I mean, we'd
Mm.
just been through, the death of her father,
Mm.
um, uh, the the and then this prospect of going, was going to be the first time that we'd ever been apart.
Mm.
And so a year seemed like an eternity. And so I it wasn't like we just kind of, God helped us through that process. And it worked out. There were a lot of blessings then. I think the other time it was probably emotionally as hard to handle is my father and her mother died within a few months of each other in the year 2000, and
Mm.
that was just devastating from both. I mean, she was close to her mother. I was very, very close to my dad, and um, it was a real low point as
Mm,
far as spiritually to do that. But that's, I mean, one of the things I think I don't know, we've always worked as a team to get through things. So it's not like we have ever been in a situation where we said, "Oh, we can't get through this." I think
mm,
we've worked it out together. Um, Jennifer's done some incredible things on her to take care of the family and move and do that when couldn't be around to do it. And
mm,
so, yeah, I think just working as a team, I don't think we've ever been in a situation we said, well, we can't handle this. It's
mm.
not fun, but we'll work it out. We just always have and always will.
And I think about, because people asked me before, they said, "How did you do it? How did you handle it?"
Right.
And first off, when Greg was in the Air Force, it was different than it is recently for the military families, because there wasn't deployments. I mean, I know people that their husband in the army or whatever have been deployed to Iran, Iraq, or whatever, and they're gone for a year and come home, and then just all the trauma of that, and then again, and we never had to do that. Now, when we got married,
Hmm.
we got married in Georgia. Greg had been, he had already been transferred, and he came back for school, and so I got to see him about every other weekend because he was in Alabama. And then we got married on a Saturday, went away for a couple days for a short honeymoon, came back to my house, packed up all of our wedding gifts in a U-Haul trailer in two cars, and started driving to Illinois, where we were going to be stationed at.
Okay.
And so I drove away and left and family. But then we got there, had to find a place to live.
Mm,
And then Greg left me for 2 weeks. And I'm in a brand new place. I knew how to get to the base and the mall. I'm in an apartment with a 12 place setting of china and a bed and a TV and nothing to sit on. And I'm sitting on the floor at night writing thank you notes and knew absolutely nobody. And, he was gone. But I
mm.
knew what could I do? I could have, cried and whined and complained, but I said, "Nope, this is my life. I've got to just get on with it." And it's
Part of that
you know,
too, that the colonel that I work for, his wife was a very great Christian
yes.
lady, and her wife reached out to Jennifer, and and that's just again that community of believers that
Mm.
you never know when they're going to reach out to help you. And she reached out and
Took me under
made
her wing.
yeah, kind of just really helped her.
And she helped me too spiritually, because I had a lot of questions about being
Mm.
really, I wouldn't say a young Christian, but not a really deep, I had not really studied a lot. And she helped me with a lot of things. And I think because of her, she helped me through the process of uh, the Catholic Church, and doing things, and helped me to hang on to my beliefs and not and things like that. But I mean, she did. She took me under her wing and helped me, get through that time. But I just, part of it, I just, like I said, it's not when what I had to go through is not anything like what a lot of military families have to go through now. But I just, I said, okay, this is what's expected of me,
Mm.
and that's what we did. When every time we had an assignment, we didn't make a big deal out of it. We told the children knew. I mean, when they were younger, it was easier. We said, okay, we're moving again. And there was only one time that our son said he was not moving. And I mean, literally, he said he was not doing it. And he was in fourth grade, and we had an assignment to go back overseas, but we had been 3 years in the DC area. And that
Okay.
was the first time he'd ever been anyplace a long time. And later he told us, after he'd finished college, that his biggest fear was that we were moving to the Netherlands. We were going to put him in a Dutch speaking school, and he was going to have to learn Dutch, because
Okay.
they were in a Belgian school. We were in Belgium, and became fluent in French. And we said, no, that's not going to happen. But he did one other time say he wasn't moving after we came back from the Netherlands, and he started his freshman year in high school. And we knew we were only going to be in the DC area for 9 months. And he said, I'm not leaving. I mean, he was asking friends if he could live with them, that he was graduating from that high school.
Mm.
So Greg goes, I guess I better get another assignment. But we just, we just worked together as a family. And I supported him in his career, and I but he always supported me
Mm.
too. It wasn't like, he didn't expect dinner on the table when he came home. He wasn't like that, but I I had my job, he had his, and I
Mm.
supported him, but he was always there, in times when I needed him.
Mm.
It was it was give and take for both of us, and we're
Mm.
still married.
So you mentioned a little bit about this earlier. How did you get to Maine? What made you move here?
Our children, our son got married in
2020.
2020,
Okay.
and he was living in New York City in Brooklyn, and
Oh,
that's
wow.
where
Okay.
his wife was. And she, right before they had the wedding in October, she had accepted a job in Vermont
Okay.
with the state, and so they knew they were going to be moving to Vermont. And we were in
Hmm.
the Charlotte, North Carolina area, and so we knew it was 16 hours to come over to see them. Well, then our daughter during that time accepted a job with IDEX in Portland,
Okay.
so she moved up here, and so we were going. If we're ever going to see our children, we
Right.
we come to Maine. So we never been stationed in Maine, never lived in Maine, so we thought, well, why not? It's an adventure.
Hmm. Huh. That is super interesting. So finding Mossbrook Church, you said you found it online?
Yeah.
Well, I saw a sign. We were right after we got here.
You should have seen it. And then
And
I
we
had,
Googled
well,
it.
if you just, this was 4 years ago. If you Googled churches, you'd see the different names. And I saw this Mossbrook, and I didn't know what that was,
Right.
but I had seen the name, but not knowing, didn't really do anything. And then she saw a sign, and
Yeah.
then we started just on YouTube. I think we had just got here and started, there was a presence on there. And so, yeah,
We watched the services
yeah.
a couple Sundays, and then we
Okay.
finally.
You were in the theater. We
Oh,
were
okay.
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
That's the first
That
time
you're
out.
still in the theater.
Okay. When was it that you were like, this church, we like this. We're gonna start
I think
going.
the first time we walked in the door.
Really?
Yeah, there was no. Yeah, we just. I don't think there was any. No, we said that was exactly what we're looking for, is the Bible teaching. Just spiritual.
And
Hmm.
the worship, and we knew that the worship team, that they were sincere in their worship. They weren't putting on a show, which we had
Hmm.
at one point. And we were in Florida when we left the Baptist church. We went to a very large, mega type church, just because we needed a chance just to decompress. And the music was great and all like that, but now that I think back on it, they weren't really worshiping. It was
Okay.
more of a show. And you know just everything, we from the time we walked in at the theater, that didn't bother us. I mean, we had been in churches that had been a bar on Saturday night, and on Sunday morning we were in there having church. So being in a theater didn't bother us. But too, I have to say that when we walked in the door, we felt welcome. I mean,
Hmm.
somebody greeted us,
Hmm.
and we felt welcome, and so we never looked back.
You're part of our small groups and overviewing the small groups. When did that conversation come up with someone that you're like, hey, I want to be part of this? Or was it the other way around?
Well, first of all, Jennifer and I have both been in small groups a number of times, um, in different locations. So small
Hmm.
group for us was definitely an important factor. And then when we got here, I think the Dave Lamberson was just started coming to the church, and there was talk of starting a new small group. So they just
Hmm.
said, meet on church on such and such a time. And there was about 10 of us that weren't involved in a small group at the time.
Okay.
And so Dave Lamberson started that group. And of course, we were happy because, like I said, that's a priority, always been a priority for us, because just from our personal gain and
Hmm.
value of small groups over the years. I mean, I look back, and that's where I probably grew more as a Christian, and my prayer life and everything was through small groups, not through just attending the church. So, yeah, that was a great blessing. We were glad that it happened when it did. I mean, I think we would have pursued joining one anyhow. But just we just came in at right time and right place.
Mm. What role are you guys playing right now with the small groups that we have here at Musbrook?
The original group that Dave Lamberson started, we've
Mhm.
multiplied at least twice, and so and they travel. So I kind of took over the small group leader. So
Mhm.
Jennifer and I host it now. I mean, we were going to another house, but it so basically leading a small group, and then I think about 2 years ago, your dad, Pastor Tim, asked me and Jim to if we would help kind of just help the small group leadership aspect of it to
Mm.
help people get into small groups and some training and that sort
Mhm.
of thing. So that's been really good too. But Jim and I work with Pastor Tim on that. So
For recommending small group to people, do you or would you recommend new believers to join a small group, and or would you also recommend people who might not be believers yet?
Yes to both. Because I think for those that are new believers, if then you have a group that you can get together and you can be open and honest with them and
Mm.
learn and ask questions in a smaller group is easier than in the big, worship every Sunday. And I just think I just remember one time a pastor talking about, mentoring people. And I feel like in small groups, you're mentoring each other. And then maybe it gives you a chance to meet someone in that group that you could be a one-on-one mentor. Because I think that's important, especially for new believers, is to find a strong believer
Mm.
that you can come to and talk to and that can help you to grow and things like that. And so yeah, I think small groups are important for new believers, middle of the road believers, old
Mm.
believers. We just think because I think no matter I mean, they say, the older you are, the wisdom you have, but I think even people that have been believers their whole life, then you learn something from a new believer that I
Mm.
never thought about this, that, oh, I never looked at it that way because like I said, for me, I grew up in the church, so it wasn't like I never had that big aha moment,
Right.
I wanna say, but it's nice to see somebody else's perspective that didn't grow up in the church,
Mm.
what they see and how they feel about things.
Mm. Greg, what would you say?
I would just say pretty much the same. I think we have some people in our group that
Mm.
that have grown a lot over the time because you can tell sometimes just by the question and they come from backgrounds such as Anglican, Catholic, other things. So maybe they've never really dived into some of the subjects or feel comfortable with prayer. So I think it's a good opportunity. For I think it's good that one of the things that Jim and I try to do is match up, kind of figuring out where people's background are and try to match them up with the group. It
Mm.
would be difficult, for example, for um, uh, somebody who doesn't believe to go to a small group that's studying
Mm.
Revelation. I mean, it
Yeah.
would probably go, "What in the world are you talking about?" So I think there's always a time where you need to, but then there's also other resources. Like Pastor Mike teaches theology, and I always recommend that too. There's benefits of small group that to me go way beyond Bible study.
Mm.
That's just the closeness and the prayer and the community. Um, but it is a learning aspect. So I think if you're a very very young believer or a non-believer, then small group leaders can also shepherd them a little bit. Maybe it's not best done in front of a big group, but one
Right.
on one, or say go talk to Pastor Tim, Pastor Mike,
Sure.
join up for the theology. There's some book studies, so I think there's
Mm.
ways for that person to grow, and also for the group to recognize that there may be a lot of things that they're not comprehending, so don't overwhelm them. So
Mm.
I think too, with small groups, it's you get to know those people, and then when you're going through that hard time, you've got people that you can talk to. And I had a good friend of mine, her husband was our pastor. She says sometimes you just have to vomit. You just have to get it all out and talk
Yeah.
to someone and and have someone listen to you and pray with you and just help you talk, get through this. And you know, um, your father, the pastors have said we're not supposed to be out there on our own. We're not supposed to be lone wolves
Mm.
in there. We need that body. We need people to be there to support us and to hug us when we're having a hard time.
Mm.
And that's what I think is important of small groups. You can, you can't just come to church, go through the worship, and then leave. You've got to.
Mm.
We need the small group.
Mm.
We all need a good friend. We need the community.
As a small group leader, I mean, there's a few questions I have. One of them's more generalized. What are some key things that a small group leader can do for people who are new to joining that group to make them feel welcome and to open up?
I think it's just understanding kind of what their background is and whether or not they've studied the Bible, just their comfort level, just
Mm.
trying to. And I think it's also not pushing them as far as let them absorb,
Mm.
let them be quiet. Sometimes I think understanding where they're at and know when there's a time not to bring something up in a group setting and just to take it offline and talk
Mm.
to them, afterwards or during the week. Uh, I think it's just, I mean, I think that's just trying to figure out where the group is so that you don't start going into, for example, this is like I said, it's no fun if you're you don't understand the Bible that well and you go
Right.
into a really difficult study word by word of a chapter in the Bible because
Mm.
I tend to shy away from that because I'm not that skilled. I feel like pastors and people that have studied and formal Bible study are best to handle some of those subjects. So sometimes you'll get a question that I, as a leader, say, "That's one for Pastor Tim or Pastor Mike," and
Mm.
let's go ask him because there's things that are obviously misinterpreted and that type of
Right.
thing.
Mm.
And then too, sometimes there's knowing that there's some book studies that not books of the Bible study, but some good, very good, based on scripture studies of a particular topic. We did one called Respectable Sins,
Mhm.
which means that I don't know if you've ever done that study, but it talks about some of the things that we're Christians and come across as that, but we're doing some of these subtle things like gossiping or maybe not praying or doing some of those things that God won't be pleased with us. But that type of that is kind of a more general, and
Right.
it goes in and talks about Scripture without going down straight down through a book of the Bible. So
Okay. Now I need this here. What are like two things to keep your group accountable throughout the week?
well, I don't do it that well, but
Okay.
probably one of them would be talk to them
Okay.
once a week and say, "How you doing?
Mm.
We talked about this last week. How you
Right.
doing with that? We're all struggle with this thing." And
Sure.
probably that would be the best. It would be to communicate with them.
Mm.
Talking would be the best. I'm not text. You never know if they're really listening, or emails or that type of thing. So, um, trying to think the other one. I guess follow up. I don't.
I don't know either. That's a hard one.
That's
Yeah.
a hard one I'm dealing with right now.
Yeah, no, I think, like I said, I think what Greg said is communication. Call and actually talk to people. I mean,
Okay.
I think we all text too much nowadays, and I know
Mhm.
you young people text too much. And I get upset because my son only texts with me, and I'd rather talk to him and
Right.
everything. So,
Yeah.
but I think when you just call somebody and say, "Hey, how you doing?" and
Mm.
everything, do you have any questions, or how's everything going? Or if you know that they've got a problem, they've asked for a prayer request, call and say, how are you doing? And um, can I pray with you? I mean,
Even better would be meeting with them.
yeah,
Mm.
Just have lunch with them.
Mm.
Go have lunch with them. I'm not saying every week, but
Sure.
I don't know if it's one or two, but I would say just communicate because
Mm.
we've struggled with a lot of groups. We've struggled. Oh, we need this covenant just because you signed a covenant that said I'm going to do this.
Right.
Human nature says we kind of fall away from that, and
Yeah.
so I don't think there's anything better than just communicating one on one with that a person
Hmm.
frequently.
I think for our small group, one of the best things that we've seen grow is we try once a month to have a social. Everybody bring food, and I've noticed lately the past several ones we've had, we've all just laughed and had a good time and just
Mm,
talking and just it's the fun and the fellowship. And I think, we need that. We need that human contact. Like I said, we don't need to be texting all the time and
right.
sending email. But I've seen that with our group, us grow more. We all have such a good time laughing. And for that, for over an hour,
Mm,
it's just we just enjoy being around each other.
mm. Yeah. What are a few key studies that you guys really like for small groups? And it could be this is just general from your understanding and from your experience.
I don't know. We've done so many.
Book studies, maybe Bible, maybe there was some sort of Bible plan that you guys did that you guys really liked.
Well, we've done, I think even in the Netherlands, several just book studies were always good. Um,
I like to I've he just passed away recently, but John MacArthur,
Mm,
I've always had a lot of respect for, and the logical way that he teaches, and I think he's pretty respected Bible scholar. So I like to use a book like that. If say somebody said, "Well, we just had a case when we weren't sure what we wanted to study," and somebody said, and one I wouldn't expect it, so what about Job? And I went, okay, but that's not the easiest one maybe
yeah.
to teach. So I ordered the John MacArthur series on it, and it kind of leads you through it and kind of helps explain some of the misconceptions. And I think those kind, if you get a respected, and we keep those resources here, a respected Bible scholar that
Hmm.
do books of the Bible, because I think unless someone, it's hard to understand. I mean, we just all it's sometimes it's the meanings and interpretations of words. So I think book studies are good.
Okay.
The other thing, we used to do this more often, but we did video series where you have a DVD and a book,
Yeah.
and
Old
then
school.
old school. But yeah, you watch maybe 30 minutes of a lesson of
Okay.
whatever that topic was. Could be just it could be a book of the Bible, or it could just be a general topic, and then you have a book to kind of read and follow along in discussion. So, like I said, I with the one we just did this year with the group Respectable Sins, I think that's a very good one for any age group and
Mm,
any people that are just walking with the Lord.
I think too, one that we've done many years ago is Jim Cymbala
okay.
from the church in New York and Brooklyn,
Brooklyn Tabernacle.
Brooklyn Tabernacle, and his own prayer.
Hmm.
And I think that's just very important. I think that um, to be a house of prayer. And I like his things, and we've talked about that with our group. But something that we're going back to right now, and we did before, is getting the notes from the message every Sunday, and going back
Mm,
over, especially now in Romans. I mean, it never hurts to go back over it again and talk about it, because you hear it and you're that day and you're going, oh, but then if you go back and look at it again, you can get more out of it, because like I said, um, Mike and Tim can't.
yeah.
They need an hour full of just teaching. That's and you don't have that. But I sometimes wish. I
Mm,
remember one time our pastor in Fernandina, he he just was a Bible teaching pastor. He was doing what God wanted to do, and I was in the choir and I laughed because he went over a little bit. He laughed and he said, "The Methodists are already at the lunch." He said, "You're not going to beat them, so just sit down and relax." And somebody said something. I said, "I could listen to him for another hour." I said,
mm,
"Just what he was saying is just and the time. I don't know how long. How long do your dad get to talk?
30 minutes.
yeah.
30 minutes.
30.
It's not enough.
Yeah.
People are going to hate me for this, but we need, because there's just so much more that you can when you get onto it one on one with other people and talking about it, and you go,
Mm,
well, I never thought of it that way and
mm,
stuff. So I think that's always a good thing, is just go back over what the message was and just
mm.
digest it.
Can't let Mike get this info. You can't let Mike hear this.
I've told him. I've told him before. So I
No,
know.
it's all good. No, other question I had for you. When is a small group too big?
I think more than
I think when
more than
once you
12.
get 12,
Okay.
and then also in the wintertime, if it exceeds your parking capability in your driveway. But no, I think realistically about 12, because then you start. It also depends too, if you have couples, then that's 5 to 6 couples, and that's probably as
Mm.
much as you want to go. Because if you have regular attenders and you get much bigger than that, then I feel like then people don't want, you have too many people trying to talk. And
Mm.
I wish some are not, it can be too big. So I would say a dozen.
And I think that's with our group that's why Dan started his own group, is because we had gotten to the point we needed to split. The whole thing with small groups,
Reproduce.
yeah, reproduce. It's not just to get in together and you form this. Yeah, you want to be a tight knit group, but
Mhm.
not that you don't let anybody else in. We don't want to. So I think that's why when you get to a certain point, okay, it's time to divide,
Mhm.
multiply and divide, and then you can reach out. There could be some new believer or new member in the new person coming to church, and they could be intimidated coming into a large group. But then
Yeah.
if you got another small group, then they're coming in, it's just getting started,
Mm.
and they would feel more welcome.
Mm. Mm. I'll leave you with this final question. Um, what is, how is God growing you guys in this time in your life?
I think right now for me, I've been really trying to concentrate on in the morning while I'm having my coffee. I don't mind getting up early, but I don't want to have to do anything. But in the morning, go ahead and do my devotion. Um, do that and try to pray. Be better about doing that
Mm.
instead of just, oh, well, I'll do it later and then I don't. So I think God is doing that with me, is trying to, okay, spend. I have this app called the First Five,
Okay.
and I don't know if y'all have heard of that, but
We can link in the description.
yeah, it started out as a women's for women. You have to spend 5 minutes with Jesus,
Hmm.
but they do have some men that do some of the lessons, but I can do it online, and it's a quick 20 minutes. I mean, it has scripture and all, and I like the app because I can click on what the scripture is, and it can read it from my iPad, and it's they do different studies, and it's really good because like I said, okay, I can sit down for 5 or 10 minutes, read this, and
Mhm.
then and pray. And it's I think to my this point in my life, I have problems sometimes trying to get really in depth. I don't know why,
Mm.
but my mind doesn't work like it used to. So doing something like that, and then I go, "Oh, this is really good," and I tell him, and he does it a lot of times too. He's doing the same thing with me, and I go, "Oh, did you read today's first five? It talked
Mm.
about baptism and or things like that." So
Mm.
that's
I guess too, it's some of the challenge that I've never been in a growing church like this, and trying to see how God can best employ us to
Mm.
let the church grow. Because with growth, there's headaches, there's new buildings, and I probably had, since I've been here, I had more fun helping put up these rafters and everything, because it was a group of there was one lady and a bunch of men but serving together. And I
Mm.
think the more that we can um, serve, and that's another thing that you talk about, being if the small group can serve together. We've had the most fun and fellowship sometimes when our group we put together, what was it,
oh, we
chairs,
unwrapped all the chairs.
unwrapped all the chairs one time, spent 2 hours just laughing and giggling and
Mm.
unwrapping chair. But it was something that we did together. And so for everything that we're going to now, just going to 3 services and all the
Mm.
challenges that presents, and finding volunteers, trying to encourage people to serve more, because it's just as we grow, there's going to be challenges with growth. I don't, and it's a wonderful thing to be a part of. This community is like is this church all of a sudden has become a magnet for
Mm.
people from living 50 miles away are coming here to
Mm.
worship, and that's amazing. But then we think about it, then okay, that'd be nice to just say, okay, we're full, everybody go away now. I don't think that's in God's plan, and I think we're going to have a lot of challenges to grow, and however, so that's kind of, to me, that's kind of exciting to be a part of, and not knowing how that, if we can continue to contribute,
Mm.
whether it's through small groups or there's just, it's amazing. It's so amazing. The pastor says a lot. It's so amazing to see the volunteers in this church and how cheerfully they go about it. And we ask, they say, well, oh, now you have to serve Saturday night and
Right.
both services Sunday morning. It's just, it's just the way that the church has been responding, and to be a part of that, and maybe to set the example to get more people, as new people are coming in, to get them engaged,
Mm.
whatever that looks like. And we all have our gifts and talents. And Jennifer and I did the little kids long years ago, and we got a lot of blessings out of it. But that's not our gift anymore. It's working with little kids. But I'm just saying, there are some
Yeah.
people that you just got to match them up to what the worship, whether it's the worship team up here or the serving team or working. It's so important to have kids ministry. So important, because if people don't have that, they won't
Mm.
come back. And so, but it's hard. We know that. We've done that. It's hard. And so people are serving and doing that. And I think that's the challenges, as not just so much as personal growth and being more, but just trying to help. How can I help grow this church? Because I think there's a
Mm.
tremendous challenge ahead of us.
Mm.
I think you're talking about being challenged or what looking. I'm. I feel like there, both of us, or for me especially, that I want to find something, a way to serve outside of the campus, outside of just the church grounds.
Right.
I want to. I mean, Greg and I before in Florida and in North Carolina, we've been involved with food ministries,
Mm.
feeding the homeless, and helping with. And we were in a very large, really a fun group of people. The food ministry in North Carolina. I mean, going to the grocery stores, picking up the food. A lot of hard work, the gleaning, going through all the rotten vegetables and fruit.
Mm.
But but what we liked about it is the people came in and they did their shopping, got their food, and we prayed with them.
Mm.
It wasn't just, oh, give them food and get them out the door. We were actually prayed with them, found out what was going on, and I miss that. And so I said, we've got, I keep saying we need to find something we can do outside of the church building.
Right. Love that. Greg, Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on the So What's the Point podcast. This has been awesome. Just kind of walking a little bit through your life and your experiences and how you found Mossberg Church and what you guys are doing here. I hope that the people listening take quite a bit away from this for serving in churches, and maybe the people who aren't believers yet, they would just decide, hey, I'm going to go check out the nearest church to me. And thank you guys so much for listening, for watching. You can go ahead, hit that subscribe button, like the video, and hit the notification bell at the bottom right somewhere, depends on where you're looking, so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time.